This is so weird. I hope you folks can see this. It says I'm live, but it's not clear to me that that's true. Warhouse Bard, welcome to the show. All right, cool. Yeah.
Warhouse Bard,
Twitch, not Twitch. All right, cool.
Hello.
Yeah.
Warhouse Bard,
YouTube,
Twitch,
not Twitch.
and
All right.
OBS.
Hello. Yeah.
Not
YouTube,
relationship.
and
OBS.
On Twitch, you just click go live. But on Twitch, you just click quite a lot of nonsense you got to manage. On Twitch, you just click quite a lot of nonsense. Hope folks are doing well. Welcome to the Friday stream. Quite a lot of nonsense. Hope folks are doing well. Welcome to the Friday stream. Quite a lot of nonsense. Hope folks are doing well. Welcome to the Friday stream. Quite a lot of nonsense. Hope folks are doing well. A lot of people are talking in chat. Hope folks are doing well. A lot of people. Too many people talking in chat. I've got two chats. I've got OBS. Too many people talking in chat. I've got two chats. I've got good. Too many people talking. I've got two chats. I've got good. Two chats. I've got good. There we go. Now you folks should only be able to hear me once. Sorry, I apologize. We had it set up here so there were two audio inputses. So is there like 100 million people in chat right now? What is going on? So we just released a video this week, which was the What Makes Good Villains video, and I thought you folks there would be some value in us hanging out and talking about that video or whatever, because obviously we stream on Twitch a couple times a week, but there's no schedule for that, and that's a lot more kind of weird, like, quirky, idiosyncratic streams. Oh, look at that stream, just super slowed down. That was an audio nightmare. Well, I mean, there's sure. So I thought, hey, let's stream on YouTube. We used to do this usually anytime we did a running the game video. I would try to make a point on Fridays around 11 o'clock to do a live stream and hang out, because this is obviously where most of the viewers are. DJ Fail says, the first time seeing you stream on YouTube. It's the first time I'm seeing me stream on YouTube. So we're even. There you go. Greetings, Finland. I'm doing great, Seven Lopi. I hope you're doing well. Ozai75, longtime friend of the channel. Oh, sweet. The XP Gamers just got their tracking number for Kingdoms and Warfare. I think about half of the total backers have gotten their stuff right now. And obviously a big chunk, like a third, basically said, I'll wait for the reprint, which is happening, toward the end of the year. So of the people who didn't say, I'll wait for the reprint, I think almost most of them, more than most of them, have gotten their stuff. So that makes us happy. Because the Kingdoms and Warfare, printing and shipping actually turned into a nightmare. When campaign for North Africa? Everybody says when campaign for North Africa, but no one says how campaign for North Africa, or even better question, why campaign for North Africa? That's still going to happen. I just don't know when. Let's see. For those of you who don't know what's going on, there's campaign for North Africa is going to be a big deal, and I just don't know how to play that game yet. It's very complex, and when you read the rules, which I have been doing, when you read the rules, the designer says actually the combat resolution part of the game is basically the same as this one GDW game called Operation Crusader. So if you know how to play that, you sort of already know how to play this, except there's a lot of logistics that I'm like, okay, cool, awesome. So I went and I got Operation Crusader, and I have been reading that, and I think I basically get it. So me and Lars are going to play it probably in the next couple of weeks. Lars and I are going to play Operation Crusader, and then once we've done that, then I'll go back and try to figure out how to play Campaign for North Africa. And it actually seems pretty cool so far. I mean, the Operation Crusader stuff, I'm not like, oh my God, this is so overwhelming. No, it's like a hidden movement game, sort of, where you have units in your army, and those units, which are really small, like one unit might be 20 people, so that's the scale we're talking about. Those units get stacked in columns, right? Columns move through the desert, and it's those, and then so you have a piece of paper that says, here's all the different columns I have, and here's where all the units that live in them, and then you move the columns around the map. So you're not even though you're in control of an enormous army, you're not tracking every single unit on the map. And then you have to kind of plot your course, basically, because there's no satellites, because it's World War II. So fog of war is a big part of this game. And you plot your movement privately, right? So I can see where your unit, I can see where your columns are, but I have no idea where they're going to go. And you're saying that column, 2 is going to go north by northwest. And so you don't plot movement like hex by hex. You don't say they're going to move to hex number 1302 and then 1307 and then 1306. That would be incredibly tedious. You basically pick a heading, a line of bearing, and there's like a map or like a diagram that shows you if you pick this line of bearing, then your unit will move in this direction like this. And that simplifies kind of simulates having really fine control over your unit. So that's what we know so far. Anyway, MCDM video quality, very high. Well, we work really hard on this stuff. We want to make good content for you folks. So there we go. Warhouse Bard, I saw that $10. Thank you very much. Just that's an adorable little cat thing. That's probably a cat. Could be a fox, probably a cat. So yeah, Big Sarge, hello, hi. Joe M, hi. Awesome to see you. Awesome to see you seeing me. Awesome that you're seeing me seeing you. We can all see. Not all of us can see. Some of us probably can't see, but those people can probably hear. If you can't do either of those things, then I'm not sure what's left. Best way to keep players engaged on long journeys through the cosmos. I mean, I have the same advice, which is unless you're people enjoy. This is one of those videos I made a while ago. I should maybe revisit this, where people really enjoyed deliberately misunderstanding what I was saying. That seems to be the internet's hobby these days, where I did a video about making travel interesting, and I'm like, I just don't think you should bother with that unless getting from point A to point B is the point, right? Like back in the day in the 70s, travel was inherently interesting because that was a major part of the game. Just getting to the dungeon was incredibly dangerous. And it was like that for a reason, by the way. Not just because they were bored or thought it might be fun or thought that's how wildernesses were. They wanted to make the wilderness really dangerous so that when you were in the dungeon and you were low on resources and you were tempted to just go home, right? You're like, well, the wilderness is just as dangerous as this fucking dungeon. Maybe we should stay here. And that tension, right? That decision about, do we stay here in the dungeon or do we try to make it back to town? The town is safety, but the wilderness is not. That creates this really, and the players, inevitably in a situation like that, one of the players is going to go, I bet if we just keep exploring, we'll find better gear, maybe some magic items. And then the dungeon won't be as terrifying to us, except we're going to probably continue to explore it, which will make it, or now the wilderness will be safer and the journey back will be easier. So that's a scenario in which travel is super fucking important, right? Travel is hugely important. It's a major part of the game. Just navigating, getting lost was a big part of the game back then. Just getting back to town was a big deal. So is that the kind of scenario you're talking about, where just getting through this asteroid field or this nebula is a major fucking challenge, right? Or is it just that your characters are going to end up on a journey for a long time and you feel like it would be cheap to skip it? It's not cheap to skip it. Go watch any movie or go watch 2010. They're like, Roy Scheider's like, I'm going to go on the flight. And then they cut to, they're at Jupiter. You don't even see the rocket take off, right? They cut all the stuff that isn't interesting. Skip. Remember Elmore Leonard's advice. Skip all the stuff. People don't write the stuff people tend to skip. Same thing. Same principle. Right? There was a super chat. What is your opinion on villains who are just evil and kill for the sake of being bad? Your evil is my good. I love those guys. Those are the best. And sympathetic villains who have a valid reason for being the way they are. It's a question of genre. And I think if you're not thinking in this mode, then I think you're probably going to end up spending a lot of time thinking about it and not coming to obvious conclusions, because you're going to be like, you get worked up about this stuff. It's all about the genre, right? Pulp villains, they like chewing the scenery, right? I was in some conversation with, I was talking to James. I was talking to James Introcaso, our lead designer, about the enemy parties for Flea Mortals. This is a monster book for 5th edition that we're working on. And I am just happy as a clam at high tide that we get to do this, because this is MCDM making the stuff that people want. And that makes us happy. It makes our jobs and our lives rich and fulfilling. I hope it lasts. And we're now moving on to the enemy parties, of which there's going to be 7 or 9 enemy parties. And they're modeled off the Black Iron Pact, which I made up. So now I was kind of on the hook to revisit them and use them as a template. Let's use the Black Iron Pact as a template. so that then we can go to the other designers and freelancers we work with and say, here, we want more stuff like this. And they know what we're talking about, right? So we give them one good example and they can go, oh, is that what you want? Okay, cool. I can go, right? And I had to write, because this is the first entry in the villain party section, I had to write the introduction to the section. And I talk about how, like, these are bad guys. These are bad guys. They're villains. They're not neutral mercenaries. And I said in the call with James, I said, if these guys had mustaches, they would twirl them, right? That's fun. It's fun to have over the top, unrepentant bad guys who just want to, tie people to the railroad tracks. But that is appropriate to pulp fantasy, right? Sword and sorcery kind of stuff. Once you get into other genres, then it's more appropriate for the villain to be relatable. Like if you watch, it's interesting because like there, and this gets into, this is what I meant when I said motivation can be kind of like, it can be a sticky wicket, and I don't think you need to worry that much about motivation to make good villains. That's why we did a whole video about this. But like Khan in Wrath of Khan, he starts off as kind of like that mustachio villain. He just wants to conquer the world. That's what that guy wants to do. And there is a reason why, because it's kind of what he was genetically engineered to do. But you don't get into that guy's like backstory or any of that nonsense. He just wants to be Alexander the Great or Genghis Khan or one of those guys. But then when the movie comes along and he meets his old nemesis again, he kind of goes crazy. And you watch him go crazy over the course of the movie. And that's also fun and interesting to watch. Real people don't go crazy like that, I don't think. It's movie crazy. But it just is down to the genre of story that you're trying to inhabit. Like, do we ever worry about Sauron's motivation or Morgoth's motivation? Nope. Are those guys good bad guys? I mean, pretty good. Like, Gollum is kind of one of the bad guys. Boromir is one of the bad guys, and we get a little bit more into their motivations, but they're not classical villains. Let's see, we got some super chats here. Thank you, Just Dave. Happy Friday. Happy Friday, Just Dave. Thank you for the $5. Keaton Hughes, thank you for the five buckaroonies. What makes villains in superhero fiction so satisfying? I think it's just that, we like the real world is complex and comes in many shades of gray in spite of our attempts maybe to bash it into black and white, but it's not. And that's one of the things that separates kids from adults is that adults are aware of the fact that we live in a complicated world. Do not trust simple answers to complex questions. Superhero villains, right? Superhero villains. The reason that fantasy is fun and compelling is because we like it when our fiction is simple and black and white the way the real world isn't, right? So that's I would say that's the reason. Keaton Hughes, it's a good question. Thank you for the $5. Freaking Paco, hello, $10. Greetings, hello. Oh, a witness of Tharizdun. I never really got Tharizdun. I felt like every adventure I saw I had that had Tharizdun in it, I felt like there was one too many bad guys and they could have cut that dude. Is trying to release, sure, like a dark, What ways can I bring this existential threat to the players where they feel able to win? I don't know that I need the players to think they can win. I think the players need to think they've got to try, right? Well, we have to try because it's us, right? It's us or we're no good. I got to make sure that the stand by. Here we go. There we go. So I don't remember. I usually, and this could be a failing of mine, I don't know. I usually do my best to try to convince the players they can't win. Right? Or just by showing the villains being really villainous and really powerful. I guess the way that they feel they can win is that there's the villain who's far distant and way too powerful to stop. But the people they're fighting right now, cultists of Tharizdun, they can beat those guys. So there's the kind of like, that's a tomorrow problem. Like beating Tharizdun is a tomorrow problem. We can handle these cultists or whatever. They might be tough, but we can beat them, right? And so that's what gives them the feeling of like, well, let's not worry about how we're going to beat this guy right now. Let's just stay on this treadmill and see what happens, right? Because we'll get more experience points, we'll get more magic items, we'll level up. It's the existential threat part that I find fun. Imperial Advisor, they gave him a motivation. Well, it's actually that Sauron's motivation in Rings of Power is his motivation as far as Tolkien was concerned. He wrote a somewhat famous letter. It is definitely in one of the copies of the Silmarillion I have, but it's not in the illustrated copy I have, a letter to a prospective publisher. Really cool letter, by the way, where Tolkien's trying to get the Silmarillion published and everyone's telling him no. And so he's trying to explain to this publisher what's in this book. And he talks about, and they'd all already read The Hobbit and they wanted The Hobbit 2.0. And he's trying to convince them, you shouldn't want that. You should want this. This is way cooler. And he goes into Sauron and his motivation, and all that stuff in Rings of Power is right out of there. It's really cool. Is Boromir a bad guy? I mean, Boromir's not a bad guy, but he succumbs to corruption, right? And in that moment, then he's absolutely a bad guy. Yeah, my camera focus is being weird. I don't really think there's anything that you could do about it, Gwillem Dawson Stanley. Just got into Arcadia, says the Feral Marshmallow, and also just threw $10 at us. Really excited to incorporate group maneuvers. I think, yeah, group maneuvers are awesome. No, I haven't been running D&D recently. No, Dusk was the last time I ran, and it wasn't 5th edition, but there's a bunch of stuff in Arcadia that I'm looking forward to using. Depending on the genre of game I run, like I don't know if this would be good for the Chain of Acheron, but I really like the, this is from a couple of issues ago, the rules for using monster giblets as ingredients for spells with components. I love that stuff. I don't know why you have a system for spell components if you don't have, okay, but if you use a basilisk eye, it does this, right? To me, it's the spell component system has all, and this was true in the 80s. All my friends that I played with all had their own house rules for harvesting monster. But like, what if you use a fucking, the hair from the tail of a unicorn as the component? What if you use, right? That seems like a classic, almost fairy tale fantasy. And they've got the one half of that system. You need spell components for this, but they don't have the other half, which is what if I used, a phoenix feather? Look at all these monsters that we get to fight. Wouldn't it be cool? So yeah, that's in Arcadia. I love that stuff. Being we watching Capital in the world. Well, super chats are coming fast and furious. Those of you who are not super chatting, I would still like to see your messages, and ideally the mods will help with that. But I'm probably going to prioritize the super chatters because they're throwing money at us. The Curly Locks has been watching the Capital world building videos. Since then, anything I would change or add to how I build a big city? No, I was pretty happy with the way we did that. I think that we did a live stream a while ago. It's still on YouTube about where we kind of we get ready for the Chain of Acheron campaign. So we start building the city of Capital. Sorry, there's a realtor trying to text me, which is normally not a problem, but I am currently live streaming. And eventually we're going to take Capital and we're going to turn it into a product. And we actually already started that. We spent a lot of money on writers and outlines, and we got about 60,000 words done, which is, it depends on how big that book is going to be. I think that's a meaningful chunk of what we intended on doing. But, I don't really know what the best way, because like I've bought huge, big city books before, and they're a lot of fun. They're really cool, and I've used them in my games. But I would sort of like to make a big city book that's a little bit easier to use. So I think we would probably start with like the Stays, which is an island, like a Manhattan-style size island that is right off the coast of Capital, and focus on that and say, because it's the docks, it's where everybody shows up at. So that actually works as like a synecdoche. Is that the right word? Like a substitute for the entire city. So if you actually had a really, really good book about this one island, well, that would substitute for a Capital book, because everything that can happen in Capital basically happens on this island. All the factions are there because this is where the ships come into dock. This is where everybody comes and goes from. So everybody that has any political power or economic power has a presence on the dock. There's crime, there's everything. So would you have information about the rest of the city? Sure, the players should be able to get on a flying carpet and go see an opera, right? They should absolutely be able to do that. But do you need the same level of detail? No, I don't think so. So that's my recommendation. If you're a dungeon master and you're thinking about big city, like big fantasy city, just remember that the players can't go to the entire city all at once. They're going to go to a neighborhood. They're going to go to a district. That district might have a couple of neighborhoods. Focus on that. Focus on that district and those neighborhoods, and use that as a substitute for the whole thing, right? When they say all hands on deck, they want the whole body, not just your hands. The whole thing's got to show up. Pansy says, I've got a campaign going. Oh, I forgot. I wanted to, our friends, speaking of campaigns, I'm going to post a link in chat to a Kickstarter from some good friends of ours, the guys at Campaign Coins, who are doing a Pathfinder Kickstarter for coin props, and they're awesome. We use their products. We've been using their products before. We knew who they were, or they knew who we are, and they're really, really high quality. So I can strongly recommend those guys. This is a plug, but they're not paying us to do this. We just like them. Any tips for working with a player to have their character become the BBEG, the big bad evil guy? Asks Renoxican. I had a subscription for Monoxicon the other day. It ran out. Thank you for the super chat. To me, that's one of the most fun things you can do in D&D is have one of the players kind of go evil on purpose, presumably. You know, you saw it with the Nails stream. That was a conspiracy between me and Tom. No one else knew it was happening, and you got to watch the other players realize that Nails is not their friend anymore. Nails is a problem, and they didn't. Some of them really didn't like that, but that's dramatic, right? That's their. I like that. So, I mean, I don't have any tips per se, other than enjoy it. You know, villains can break the rules. Villains can do things that heroes can't. That's part of the fun. It would always be, I would call up a friend of mine or text a friend of mine and say, hey, here's what's going on in the world right now. What is your evil villain character going to do? And they'd be like, ooh, and it was kind of a quasi game, right? They would have some die rolls to make and stuff like that, and some resources to worry about. But otherwise, they don't even have a character sheet, stuff like that. Non-super chat question: do you have advice about villain lieutenants defecting from the? Oh, I love that. Mr. Such a Champ says, do you have advice about villain lieutenants defecting from the... That should absolutely be a possibility. And you can telegraph that, too. If there's multiple villains, it's not difficult to take an NPC and make this one NPC a little bit more sympathetic, a little bit more complex internally, and have conflict, right? And you can do things, you can telegraph it to the players. Like you can have villains say... repeat the dogma of the villain, but then, you know, they don't like saying that stuff. Their face clouds over. They experience doubt when they say it. You know, you can tell the players that and they'll be like, hey, hang on a minute. Or just have one of the lieutenants have the other ones be horrible monsters, and then have one of them just be a little bit more human, and you can talk to this person and let the players think about negotiating with them, right? Or give them a backstory that's somewhat self-evident about how they used to be a good person and they've gone over to the dark side. And if the players find that out, then they'll be like, you used to be this one awesome person, right? And so it's all about telegraphing that to the players so they know that this person can be negotiated with and won over. Because if they do that, if they can convince one of the villain lieutenants to come over to our side, that's huge. I mean, in the sense of the players feel amazing. They feel like we did this, right? They'll probably think it wasn't part of the adventure and that they just, which is always good, even if it was part of the adventure. Thank you for your vids, Mercs at Arms. I'll take your $2. Thank you very much. Been DMing for a year. I bet your players are having a blast. Hang on a minute. Super chats only last a certain time. I've got a campaign going that involves a war with dragons. That sounds good to me. I would love that. How can I introduce a recurring dragon villain, considering how aloof and untouchable they seem? Use the lieutenant. Use the head of the cult. The head of the dragon cult is the one lording stuff over there. I appreciate the idea that, like, you know, it's the same thing. There's a book, probably a really good one that you would probably get a huge kick out of, called The Lord of the Rings, in which there's a bad guy. You literally never meet this dude. He has not him. His ring has one line of dialogue. And that's kind of him. But apart from that, you never meet Sauron. You never talk to the dude, but you meet all of the people that are working for him, like Gollum, eventually, unfortunately, Boromir, Saruman. Saruman's a great bad guy. What's my opinion on evil races? Can they be inherently evil? Should they not exist in D&D? This is a dial that you can put wherever it suits you and your table, depending on your style of play. I'm not going to judge what you do in your home. If you and your friends, if everybody's having fun, then knock yourself out. But me, because I run for lots of different people, especially a lot of new players, various companies that I've worked at, and now I've got a company where I sell products to people that don't know me and don't sit at my table. I need to think a little bit more complexly about this, and I enjoy doing that. And my rule, and I've talked to at least James, if not James and Hannah, about this, is that, like, if you're a species that shares this world with humans, then we need to imagine you complexly, right? Because if you were, and there's a lot of reasons for this. One of them is my assumption that, like, if this species was actually literally pure evil and they just live next door, that's not going to persist for hundreds of thousands of years the way species do. Right. So that would have got worked out a long time ago. So when we're talking about things like orcs and stuff like that, orcs and goblins and elves and dwarves, I just see them as all alien species. I just see them as like Vulcans and Andorians and, what are the alien species from, like Wookiees? I just see them as alien species on this planet. But then the farther away you get from that, the more explicitly evil something can be, as far as I'm concerned, like mind flayers. They're these extraplanar aliens. They're literally aliens in the context of a fantasy world. Those guys can be pure evil, right? Beholders, stuff like that. But even then, it's if I think it would be fun or interesting to have one of these guys kind of go off the ranch and maybe be slightly less evil than their brethren, then that's cool. But that's my attitude. And then there are things like hobgoblins, which in the MCDM Legendarium are devil goblins. They are devil goblin hybrids, right? This is a tribe of goblins that basically sold their souls to a devil some time ago, and now they've got super crazy evil superpowers. Well, they made that choice, right? There's tons of other goblins that didn't, and they just want to live in that cave and be happy, right? And they want to mess with anybody. But these goblins made a choice, and now they are hobgoblins. Hob is a old English word or slang kind of for the devil. So that's cool. I'm down with that. But otherwise, like I don't see orcs and goblins as any different than elves and dwarves. And we never did. I started playing in 1985, and there were always the humans were always the bad guys in all the games we played. It was the only reason the orcs are out to get us is because we cut down their fucking forest, man. Like they were perfectly happy to just live by themselves, right? And just skirmish with other tribes in the forest over borders, and they didn't even really care. They treated everybody else as either you're with us or against us, and it didn't really matter in that context what your species was until the humans came along and started cutting down the forest, and now everybody's pissed at us, right? And the humans don't live long enough. That's kind of the thing about humans and elves that I always liked, and dwarves. Humans don't live long enough to see the consequences of their kind of anti-forest behavior. They build roads, they do all this stuff. They have short lives. So that's always been my attitude toward the villainous races thing. It's like you could be a race of evil, scheming, genius, madmen, whatever, as long as you're sufficiently alien in form or origin. Oh, hey, Mike Gonzalez says, just want to tell you how much the messages we put on the back of the DM screen. We have our own DM screen. I think you can pick it up in the store now. And it's 50% 5th edition stuff and 50% warfare stuff. And I would very much like to do, and I'm pretty sure we will do, a 100% 5th edition screen that's a generic screen for everybody. We put a lot of thought into that screen and about what is actually useful for dungeon masters when they're running, as opposed to what other people might hope was important to you. Like, let's make an NPC. I don't actually think we need an entire panel of a DM screen for that. I don't think that's what's important to the DM right now. What's important to the DM is opening the door in action. What kind of action is it? Can I open the door, drink a potion, and attack somebody? That kind of stuff is important, and that's on there. And I put little affirmations. I put little affirmations on the screen at the top of each one. So you look up and you're like, hey, Matt's telling me he believes in me. And so I'm really glad to see people appreciate that, because I thought it was neat. How do I feel about villains fighting each other? I think Henmar M says, how do you feel about villains fighting each other? This kind of gets into the, gosh, it'd be nice if there were an AI running this, right? Like, there's only a certain amount of shit you can be expected to keep track of at once. So if you as a DM, based on the game you're running, think you can handle having multiple enemy factions kind of vying for control against each other, knock yourself out. I've done that many times, but I kind of do it ex post facto, right? The players decide to go to Villain and try to solve the problem there. They discover Explicitophilis and the cult of the reptile god. They beat that person, and then they find these letters and messages in her treasure piles. And it's all the other villains in the area that are trying to get her on their side, right? And that's when they start to discover the existence of these other villains. And to the players, it seems like it's this really complex web of relationships and interactions, but none of it happened live. I just wrote up a couple messages, and I mixed them up so that there's not in any order, and the players had to figure out how to put the messages in order and stuff like that. And that works really well. It creates the illusion of a very complex web of interactions, even though I just wrote some letters a little while ago, right? I just made it up. This stuff's not actually happening live. The players don't know that. They imagine it's happening live. Let's see, what have I missed any super chats? Actually, the super chats seem to have all gone away. So that's good, I think, in the sense that I think I've gotten to them. Nope, I guess they all expired is what happened. It's Tennessee Tyson, who's not from Tennessee. Hey, Matt. Hey, how's it going? Thank you for the £5. Would I give some tips on running a good anti-villain? Yeah, that's Jamil China plate, short for mate. Anti-villains, we did a whole video on the difference between heroes, anti-heroes, villains, and anti-villains. And let me see if I can remember. If I can remember it, then I deserve a gold star. So obviously heroes do the right thing for the right reason, and villains do the wrong thing for the wrong reason. But then you have anti-heroes. Anti-heroes do the right thing for the wrong reason, and anti-villains do the wrong thing for what they think is the right They're for the right reason. Like I hate that I have to do this, but ... So I don't really know if I have any tips on what's a good anti-villain from what I would do. My tip would be go find a good anti-villain from fiction and rip it off. And if I could think of one off the top of my head, I would do that right now. Unfortunately, I have limited powers. Harry H, I saw that £5. You're welcome on the videos. Thank you for watching them, and thank you for your kind words, and thank you for the whatever £5 turns into in dollaroonies. The video on leading a creative life. I just watched that again recently because a friend of mine found it and said, this is a really good video. And I watched it back and I was like, I spent too much time talking about D&D in that video because I kind of wanted it to be a generic, just you're thinking about doing anything artistic video, but I harp on about D&D. But that's the benefit of hindsight. In my experience, hindsight is 50-50. Logan, I see that $10. Your evil villain got the MacGuffin, which is the only thing that can kill them. How do I set up a good adventure so the players to steal it back before the final confrontation? I would say the players got to do some work, right? The players have to feel like if Superman got the kryptonite, and so now you're like, well, now what? Great, the only thing that's going to stop him is kryptonite, and he's got it. Well, the players need to feel like they concocted the scenario that would get the kryptonite back. They need to distract the hero, and which is not hard to do. The villain, which is not hard to do, by the way, to get the villain to go somewhere and do something because the villain thinks the heroes are over there or somebody's going to try and stop him, and then the heroes can sneak into the villain's lair and steal the Sword of Kos or whatever, right? And if the players come up with that idea, then you can make it easy for them to do it. It should be easy, probably, because ultimately the thing that should be hard is fighting the villain. Sneaking into his place and grabbing the kryptonite or the Sword of Kos or whatever the key is that's going to unlock his vulnerabilities, that should be easy and fun. And the players, it should just be a couple of skill rolls, and then and then the villain's going to leave their lair because they think something's going on somewhere. You created a diversion, right? It could be big, it could be small, it could be in another town, it could be in another plane of existence or whatever, but they're gone for a little while, and while they're gone, and if the players can do that, then they feel awesome. They really feel like this is a real world and they are affecting it, and it was their ideas that moved the plot forward. And when that happens, there's nothing as good as that. There's nothing as good as that in any genre of game or any category of it. Stan, thank you for the $10. That sounds awesome. Starbursts are delicious. I would love playing in your game and beating bad guys and eating Starbursts. When I was a kid, Starbursts, you could only get them at the movie theater. And so even still today, I think of Starburst as movie candy. I have a Red Dragon Dracolich, says Ender Cobra, that might be the big bad evil guy for my campaign, but what are some components for the Lich's brew that would make sense? That's a good question. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything. That actually sounds like a Discord question. We have quite an active Discord with many, many thousands of people in there and lots of channels, and questions like that tend to get a lot of attention. And you get cool answers from the yeah, what would I say makes good rivals? You mean like I don't know, Lightning Lancer, thank you for the $10. I guess it depends on what you mean by rival. You mean like a competing party? That's a good question. I don't know. I've never really done the we're in a race with a rival party thing. It sounds cool to me, and I know other adventures and stuff that have done it, but that is sort of off my radar. What do I do when I hit a creative roadblock? Zazimos, thank you for the $5. Anytime you get stuck, because I don't know that they're really when creative roadblocks come in different shapes and sizes, but in my experience, either I don't feel like creating and I have to, I'm on the hook to do something, I just don't feel like it. That's a mood. Well, when that happens, I go watch some dope ass movie, or sometimes a TV show, but usually a movie, or it could be anything. But usually consuming art is what, engaging with art is the thing that fires my imagination and gets me excited. And you'd be surprised at how easy it is. It can be just literally the way this cinematographer lit this one scene, and there's not even any dialogue in it. It wasn't even important. It just, I was like, that's a cool fucking shot. Look at that. The way they have it's a drone shot flying over the trees, and there's mist coming out of the forest. It's just fucking cool. And that, just something as simple as that can make me want to get back and start creating. But yeah, getting excited by a piece of art, whether it's a comic book I'm reading or a novel or a movie I'm watching, that's all it takes. Music can do it too. I go listen to I went and listened to the first King Crimson album for the first time a couple of months ago, and I was blown away, and it got me in a creative mood. However, there's times, and this kind of sounds like what you're talking about, Zazimos, where we're halfway done, by the way. We're just going to try to wrap this up at or around noon, maybe 12:30. We'll see. I got meetings. the hell was I talking about? Oh, there's another kind of, and this sounds like a little bit more like what you're talking about, where you're stuck because you got something, you got an adventure that you're in the middle of, and you know you know that you need a chunk to happen next. You just don't know what it is, and you're not excited. In my experience, and the equivalent there for me as an author is, I've got an outline, and I know what happens in chapter 32, and I've written the first 31 chapters, so I guess this one's next, and I just don't feel like it. Well, I'll go write chapter 50. Still don't feel like writing chapter 32. Go write chapter 60. Still don't feel like writing. Well, that's probably because that chapter that I need to write and then I don't feel like writing, that part of the adventure that you need to flesh out but you're not excited by, is boring, right? You got to put a gun on the table. You need tension. You need to be excited. You need to be excited by what's coming next. Because if you have an idea, if you're like, I don't feel like doing this, come up with some dope ass, what are you excited by? Go look at the monster manual. Go look at some crazy monster manual that's not even for 5th edition and start flipping through it and look at a monster. Like, oh, that thing's fucking cool. I'm gonna stick it. Now you're excited. Now you're excited by something and the block is gone. You need tension. You need drama. You need to be excited as an author or as a dungeon master, because if it just feels like homework, if designing the adventure just feels like homework, then that's probably how it's going to feel to the players. Any advice to get the players to work for the villain, says Emmanuel Bonini. To get the players to work for the villain. That's not hard to do, right? Somebody shows up to hire. How do the heroes normally get a job? How do they normally go on quests? Someone comes and tells them there's a problem they have to solve. Right. Well, that's what you do. In fact, back when I was working in video games, there was a game I worked on, a big AAA game, and we spent a lot of time. We threw a lot of this work out for no good reason, but we spent a lot of time working on the villain and their motivation, and about hiring the heroes to work for the villain. Not even through a lieutenant. It's easy to do if you do it through a proxy, right? Because somebody comes up, they hire the heroes, and the heroes are like, "Yep, we're down to do this for you," and then it turns out that person is working for the villain. That's super easy, and you've seen that a million times in TV and movies. But it's a little bit harder to have the heroes actually work for the villains straight up. This is the Sauron shows up and says, "Hey, do you guys want to do a job for me?" Well, the players are probably not going to be inclined to say yes. Well, so what do? You have the villain give them some fucking dope ass magic item that they would never get access to otherwise because they're not high enough level. And be like, here, I just want you guys to like me and to work for me. And I realize I have a reputation. I think that reputation is somewhat undeserved just because I'm a giant lidless eye and I live in a place called Mount Doom. That's that I don't call it Mount Doom. I call it Mount Pleasant. Your evil is my good. So here's a bunch of dope ass magic items. You're a paladin. Oh, great. I've got a whole chest of Holy Avengers. Here, you want one? And the paladin's like, actually, yes, I do want one. That would be very nice. Thank you. I'm only 3rd level, right? And now they're like, I like this guy, right? So you'd be surprised. I mean, this is obviously down to taste and down to your table, but you would be surprised at how often that works. It's like, this is the bad guy. It's like, yeah, but he gave me a Corvette and I always wanted one. So that's whoa. That was David Carrick. I saw that. Thank you for being super awesome. $100. We appreciate that. Your videos taught me how to run D&D. Well, you would have got there. I just gave you confidence. You didn't know you didn't need my videos, but you didn't. You would have got there on your own. Hopefully I just shortened the way, I think is the best we can do. Your players come back every week for 3 years. Holy shit, that's awesome. That's awesome. I bet your players are having a blast. Hey, David Carrick, it's time for you to tell your players that pretty soon you're going to run out of content. And if they want to keep playing, one of them has to step up and Dungeon Master, because that's how the cycle perpetuates. Sloth with Shades. My videos brought me back to DMing. We actually hear a lot of that with Flea Mortals. This is not a plug, but one of the things that makes it fun to work on that project is the number of people who are like, you know what, I just gotten bored with 5th edition and then moved on to other stuff, but all of a sudden, so that makes me happy. You're introducing 2 and maybe 3 beginner groups to D&D. That's the best. D&D is the most fun you can have with your brain. I really believe that. It can be a lot of work, but here's the thing. Once you're on group number 2, just recycle the shit from group number 1, because group number 2 doesn't know. You don't have to, there's this thing in you that thinks it always has to be original every time. Nope, that is absolutely not true. And it's going to be different because this is the first time you've ever run these adventures for the second time. I've never run this adventure twice before, so you're going to change it and you're going to do things differently. You're going to learn from it. So that makes it easy and fun, I think. Thank you for the super chat. We appreciate it. Slavin, welcome. I'm not going to try and pronounce your last name. Kovacevic. I'm not going to try to pronounce Kovacevic. I don't know what an RSD is, but we now have 1,000 of them, thanks to Slavin. Thank you very much. In your campaign, you have this really nice guy, a king. Well, he came, okay, time immemorial. Time immemorial, by the way, was about 30 days ago. He has to die for the world to be saved. Should I fight the party with him or self-sacrifice? Oh, this sounds like a PC? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but I suspect whatever answer you come up with is going to be the right one, because you've put a lot of thought into this, and the amount of thought you put into it is more than mine, and the quality of thought is not as good as mine would be. So I get questions like this all the time. It's like, I can't really audit your game. Camera focus is borked. Well, what are you going to, unless you're this camera, I don't think there's anything you can do about it. So I appreciate the 1,000 RSDs, Slavin. Good luck with your character. Stephen Bang says, no question. Well, then I don't have an answer. Just gratitude for the years of inspiration. Well, then I have gratitude. Thank you. Thank you for the kind words and the 10 pounds. We appreciate it. Matt Keller says, your videos have helped you gain confidence as well. Thank you very much. That makes me happy, because it's actually fun. Running D&D is fun. You don't need confidence to do it. You just got to start doing it and to suck at it, and you'll be like, well, I didn't have confidence, but I had a lot of fun, right? So that's the secret. It's fun. D&D is fun even when you're sucking at it. 6 years. Damn, that's awesome. And it's your first time DMing for them. That's cool. So that means that your old DM is now one of your players. That's always the best. That's another thing, that if you ever get DM burnout, the easiest thing for me is just to play. And that's one of the things I like about I don't really consume streaming D&D content or streaming TTRPG content. I don't really know any. I have friends of mine that are big streamers, and they don't do it either. But if I'm ever just not feeling it and I need inspiration, just watching somebody else DM for 5 minutes makes me go, I want to get back behind the screen. So I appreciate that. Matt Keller, thank you very much. Brozagar never saw me talk about D&D play by post. No, and I don't like that. That's kind of a very old school pre web 1.0 kind of internet. Or indeed, literally back in the 70s and 80s, people played literally with letters. It's not really something I've ever done before. I appreciate the $10. It's not something I've really done before. So I don't really have any commentary on it, except with the Discord. Like, it's not in this day and age. Like, I'm in a Starfinder game right now, and we're using Discord to communicate, and we have an RP channel, and it's very asynchronous, right? Somebody posts something, and they know when they post it that they don't know when anyone's going to see it. It might be hours or a couple of days. So that's an asynchronous way to play. And Discord is awesome because it gives you a persistent place that isn't going to go away, and you can come back, you can dip into it anytime you want, and you can think about your answers, right? You can think about, what would my character say? You're not on the spot. You have time to compose a message, right? So role playing over Discord is awesome, especially when we're all professionals, so we all have different schedules, and we're not all live in the Discord at the same time, having to think on our feet. One of the things I've discovered is there are a lot of players. I would say every player has a think on my feet, or I need to think about this dial, and it's in different places. And there are a lot of players. This is something I discovered once I started using Fantasy Grounds to run D&D online, was there were a lot of players. Every group I've run for, there's one or two people who they don't normally talk that much at the table, but in Fantasy Grounds, because they can use text and type, they can sit and think about what they're going to say. They don't have to worry about doing a voice because they feel weird doing that. They don't necessarily feel comfortable speaking in character at all, but they can type it out. And you're like, holy shit, this person who's normally very quiet is suddenly in character and being awesome. So that's my chunk on play by post, such as it is. Joseph Roloma. Well, thank you for the 125, whatever those are. Ooh, a 4E Dark Sun game. I played Dark Sun in 4th edition. It was really cool. So that sounds awesome. I hope you're having a good time. DM Studios. That's a good name for a studio. How long should you let a setting level eel guy sit before they can start getting taken down a peg? That's a good question. I don't think there's a right answer for it. I think that I think in general, campaign ending bad guys should not start being relevant to the players until they're starting the adventure where they're going to fight that guy. So they can hear about them, right? They can hear about them and know that they're out there, but I don't think it should. The players shouldn't really feel like they're supposed to do something about it and they can't. That can be frustrating, right? The players should know, well, eventually we'll fight this guy, but right now we have to worry about Explicitica Defilis, because you don't want the players to feel like the DM is expecting us to do something about this and we can't. This sucks. That's not fun. That's being frustrated, and players don't like getting frustrated. So it's better for them to have local problems to solve that they know they can solve, and that they can be like, well, we'll worry about that guy later. We'll worry about Korsakef the Infinite later on. And the way they know that the clock is ticking is when all of a sudden it's the beginning of the Korsakef the Infinite adventure, and it's his bad guys coming after them, not just random idiots. Hopefully that's a good answer to your question, Alexander Simarg. There you go, Alexander Simard. Thank you for the 10 Canadian dollarinis. You're using creatures from Flea Mortals, and they are great. Well, we are very happy with that. We work really hard on them. In fact, when the stream is done, I'm going to jump on a call with James, and we're going to go over another big chunk of monsters. A living lost city. That's cool. That's awesome. There's a couple of good lost cities. Isn't there a necromancer game, Baraxis? Baccaris? There's some famous lost city. There's a couple of good lost city adventures, I think. What would be your main do's and don'ts for a living city? You mean, I know it depends on what you mean by a living city. If what you mean is, typically when people say it's a living world or it's a living city or whatever, they mean that it's kind of on its own plot, and the plot accelerates and advances on its own, and the world state is always changing even when the players aren't looking at it, right? And that's classic sandboxing, right? Is like the players are going to go fight Explicit Dephilus, but while they're doing that, the bad guys they didn't try to stop all advance. And really, I think you can just use smoke and mirrors for that. The players need to feel like the plot is advancing. That doesn't mean the plot actually needs to advance. That could be an enormous amount of work, right? So I would say I would mostly use smoke and mirrors. I remember talking to one of my players in the chain, and I said, is your impression that Capital is like this incredibly complicated living place and she's like, yes, it's very complex and blah blah blah, and she says it seems like there's like 50 years of history that you've been working on. I'm like, I'm literally making it all up, usually an hour or two before the show. And she's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, it's just smoke and mirrors. It's the illusion of these NPCs are all running around in the background scheming and plotting, but the actual plot doesn't really advance until I need it to. Should I finally read Dune? I don't know. Should I finally redo it? I mean, yeah, go for it. If you watched that, the thing is, my attitude toward movies and books, Experiment, thank you for the $5, is that like it only works in one direction. If you read the book first and fall in love, you might hate it, in which case you're probably not going to watch the movie. But if you read the book and you fall in love, then I think the movie's only going to let you down, because there are things you loved about that book, just like there are things the director loved about the book, but they're going to be different things. And so inevitably, there's going to be stuff that you really loved about this book not going to be in the movie. And you're like, oh. And there's going to be stuff that's in the movie that that's not really how I saw it. Even if you like the movie, I'm not saying it's all that. It could be 80% super good, but then there's always going to be this chunk where you're like, nah. But if you watch the movie and you love the movie, then when you go read the book, you're like, oh, it's just more. Look, there's just all this more stuff in here, right? So I think it generally only works in one direction. But I mean, if you watch that first movie and you liked it, yeah, watch the next one. Or read the book, read the book, and then go watch the next one. And I think probably you'll like the next one better. I can't imagine you got your setting right the first time. Did you ever backtrack world building pieces of your setting mid-campaign? BMD, thank you for the $10. Not in the sense I think you mean. I used this phrase on a Twitch stream the other day. I said, every time I run D&D, I recreate my world from scratch. The issue is, that sounds like it might be a lot of work. It's not. I just, it turns out I like 90% of it every time I do that. I'm like, actually, I just revisit everything. I'm like, no, that's fine. Yeah. The world is called Orden. That's fine. Elves, like, that's all fine. But then there's always something I'm going to change just because I'm in a different mood now. I'm running a different kind of game. Like a good example is in Dusk. If you are a player or a civilian in my Dusk campaign, Dusk is set in Orden. It's set in a very specific place. You can see it on the map of Andrim. But when those players all look up, and they don't all know this, but some of them do. When they look up in the sky and see the sun, what they're seeing is the jail of Tiamat. The reason the sun burns is because Tiamat is constantly raging and trying to get out. Right? And that's where Tiamat is locked. It's her prison. And the players, the end of Dusk, if we ever play again, which, we might, if we ever finish that campaign and there's like book 5, for instance, that seems appropriate to me, they're going to go to the sun and like walk on it, because it's not a big ball of plasma. It's not a physical universe. It's a fantasy universe. They don't have nuclear fusion or anything of that stuff. Right? But that's not true of anybody in the chain. When the chain look up and see the sun, it's just the sun. It's not true of the characters in my novels. Every time I run a campaign, I change the stuff that I'm bored by, and I have new cool ideas. And those new cool ideas, the players think this is what's true of Matt's world. But really, it's just true of Matt's world for this game and these players. What's the point of doing it any other way? Why would I hang on? Why would I hang on to an idea I wasn't excited by? And why would I throw out an exciting idea just because it's not how I did it before? What's the value there? What's the upside? So every time I run a campaign, I am free to recreate my world from scratch. It's just that every time I do that, I'm basically happy with most of it. And then there's a couple bits that I'm like, oh, let's do this. So everything, if you compare my world now to this same world in 1991, when I first started running in it, they're unrecognizable. And if it wasn't for the fact that I was streaming and I've got a company right now, and my world is our basic world. If it wasn't for that, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, knock on wood, it would be probably unrecognizable from where it is. I also change stuff as the rules change. As the rules to the game change, I'm like, there are Dragonborn in D&D now. Okay, well, I guess there's Dragonborn in my world now, right? Why not? Hopefully that's a good answer. I wish there was a way to stop the super chats, because what's going to happen is people are going to ask super chats and I'm not going to get to them. How would I run a quest on the sea, asks Alex Wallout. This is not a super chat, so non-super chatters still get attention. How would I run a quest on the sea? On the sea, on the sea, on the sea, on the sea, on the sea. I have a pirate captain. For I am the pirate king. Taran, hurrah for the pirate king. And it is a glorious thing to be a pirate king. That's the same as the Pirate King song. That I would like to be a recurring villain. That sounds good. But escape seems very easy on the open ocean. How do I get the players to engage? Well, that's a good question. I don't know. Let me see. Hang on a second. Well, I mean, I don't have a good. So you're asking about vehicle combat. You're asking about ship combat and stuff like that. And I don't know that I've ever really seen a TTRP, a skirmish-based RPG, which is to say a tabletop role-playing game where you play one character and it's, and that's it. I don't think I've ever seen a game. Well, here's another way of putting it. I don't think I've ever seen a fighting monsters game with a really good and robust vehicle combat / ship combat system. So in the absence of that, you kind of got to wing it. And if the bad guy seems like a relatively simple problem, actually. If you have a high seas campaign and the villain it's easy for the villain to get away. The problem isn't the reason the villain can get away easily is not because it's an ocean. It's because they got a better ship. That's the only reason. If the pirate captain can get away really easily, that's not because of the oceans. That's because he's got a really dope ass ship. So how are we going to catch him? Well, either we need a doper ship, or we need to undope his ship. And that's up to you. It's your game. How they do that, I don't know. My L5R video got you clips and dips, $10. Thank you very much. Into the setting. Years later, my lads are traveling through Rokugan as a bunch of Crane Clan samurai. I was a Crane Clan samurai once, and my friend John Wick. Well, actually, I was a monk, a Dragon Clan monk in my friend John's game, engaging in absolute shenanigans. Those are the best kind of shenanigans. Thank you for cluing me into that world. Yeah, I don't. People ask me questions about L5R all the time because of that video, but what I try to explain is I don't really know anything about that setting or that world outside of the collectible card game. That was my in, right? So that's that. I love that game. It was the first time I ever saw cosplay. First time I ever saw cosplay was at Gen Con, and it was people cosplaying as characters from Rokugan. So I thought that was really cool. Warhouse Bard, I saw that. Thank you for the $10. No, I think I watched Soylent Green once, Warhouse Bard, and it didn't really make an impression on me. So it's not a Mimnos, for instance. I think somebody's super chat just fell by the waist. Mr. Twisby, I saw that. Thank you very much. Thank you for everything. Thank you, Mr. Twisby. Yeah, you wear the MCDM shirt. Only cool people have MCDM shirts, so you always know if you see one in the wild. I had an employee at a Jersey Mike's accost me in a parking lot the other week, and it was actually pretty cool. I talked to the guy for a little while. Wasn't weird. I like meeting fans. It's cool. You see somebody wearing an MCDM shirt, they are awesome. That's just the law. That's the rule. I feel like I'm behind on the super chats. Stephen Horgel, thank you for the $5. Well, we want to keep. The thing is, Stephen Horgel says, "Thank you for MCDM. Your products make me want to play D&D in a way the Seattle company hasn't in years." The thing is, that's the great thing about 5th edition for a third-party company. It's the reason we like working on it. And people are always like, "When are you going to do your own RPG?" That is inevitably going to happen. We are all professional game designers, and we all have our own ideas about what we want to do. And there are reasons to kind of decouple from the Seattle company's products because that's not our game. But the thing is, we have really strong opinions about how to make this game fun, and we want to put them in front of you. We want you guys to meet the talent and the summoner and the tactician and the operator, and we've got lots of ideas, and we're revising the Illrigger, we're revising Strongholds and Followers. We want to make it fun. We want to make the game fun for you folks, and we can make that a priority in a way another company might not be able to, if that makes any sense. Another company has to worry about the brand and managing the brand, and are we getting value out of our investment, and are our shareholders happy? All we have to worry about is this product fun? So it's fun for us to work on. We love making these products. They're great. We love testing them. They're fun. So thank you, Stephen. We appreciate it. JP Roy, your players made a deal with an adult blue dragon to retrieve the egg. That's cool. Yeah. How to keep the dragon connected to the party without just attacking them or keeping them motivated. That's a good question. Off the top of my head, I would probably have, I'm just improvising this, I would probably have the dragon give one of the characters one of the dragon's scales, right? And I might even have it be like surgically implanted into the PC, right? Magically, right? So it like melds into their skin. And now that becomes a talisman of that dragon. And that PC, and maybe only that PC, can feel. Maybe it's not direct telepathy. That would be a little bit too literal. Maybe it's just they can feel what this dragon feels, right? And so it's almost like thumbs up, thumbs down. I don't think the dragon likes that, right? That's just something I came up with. But it makes, I always like, this is a kind of, there's actually a screenwriting school that you can always tell graduates of this school. Like Chris Nolan is one of them, where anytime there's a relationship between two characters that is important to the film, they have an object. Go watch that original Chris Nolan Batman movie, right? There is an object that those two characters share that has some meaning to them, and when one of the characters, when they're split up, sees this object, they remember the other, right? So you take this relationship between the heroes and the dragon, and you contextualize it in some object, and then when they see or they use that object, they remember the dragon. That's writing. That's professional writing. Did I miss any? I love your videos, Dark Sandman. Thank you for the money. Raymond Feist. I don't think I've ever read any Raymond Feist. That seems like the kind of thing I'll eventually get around to. What's your opinion? Asks Sloth with Shades. What's your opinion about names being too on the nose? The overarching theme of my campaign is the repeating cycle of, Janus is the name for the world. Well, so here's my Janus. Yeah, okay, I get it. So here's the thing, Sloth. Here's my answer, which may be useful to you. It may not. I was working on a big AAA video game. They were spending a lot of money on it. And I was in charge of coming up with because I was the writer, coming up with the names for the missions. And I was talking to my friend who is now my employee and kind of one of my business partners here, Jason Hasenauer. He's our art director. And we were both working on this game together. And I was kind of lamenting to him that I couldn't use the name I wanted to use because it was too obvious. It was too on the nose. I'm like, I can't call it that, but it's the best name and I can't think of anything else. And he's like, what's the name? And I was like, it should be called, the name of this mission should be the Maginot Line. But that's too obvious. And he's like, Matt, no one in this building besides you and me knows what that means. And I was like, what? And he goes, you can absolutely call it that because no one's going to think it's too obvious. They don't know what it means. I'm like, that's bullshit, dude. And he goes, let's go. And he just walked around the office and asked. And there was one guy who, by the way, was a tank commander before he was in video games. So of course that guy knows what the Maginot Line is. He was literally the only person out of like 60 people that had ever heard the term. Right. And so I used to think the way you do, like, I can't call it that. That's too on the nose. I don't worry about that anymore. I just call it what I think is the best name, and I rest assured that if it's a reference to something, that most of my players aren't going to get it. But that's how it should be. That's part of the fun of reading fiction, is or experiencing, consuming, reading or experiencing fiction, is that the author puts, Terry Pratchett. You read Terry Pratchett's Discworld, and you think you're learning about the Discworld, but mostly what you're learning about is the real world. Like Ankh-Morpork is basically London, and that dude does a shit ton of research about the city of London, and he puts it into his fantasy book, and you think, well, this is funny. This is interesting. He has a lot of really cool ideas for this fantasy world. And then you find out in the real world, oh, they really did that. That is a real, they didn't just do it. That's actually the same term they used for it. Like, there's the episode with the printing press, and they need paper, and they have to go talk to the papermonger. And there's all this language about these people that go out and collect all the garbage and all the different terms for it. And it's literally right out of, in fact, a specific book about life in London in the 1800s. And it's really cool this is a part of growing up that I think everybody should have. That experience of being a young person and having basically no context for any cultural references. So you're reading a fantasy novel or a science fiction novel, and you don't really have any way of knowing what is the author inventing and what is actually real world references. And which of these references does the author assume I will know? And which of them are actually kind of sly and a wink, and they're intended to be more like an homage than a deliberate reference? And then you read that book when you were 12 or when you were 15 or whatever, and then you're in your 20s or whatever, and you discover, oh, that's a real thing from the real world. And you make this connection between something that happened now and this thing you read, and your world gets a little richer and a little deeper, and your life gets a little fuller. That is a really cool experience to have. So I say use the references that are the references. And if you're and generally I think if the player gets the reference, they feel smart. They don't think it's cheap. They don't think it's cheap and on the nose. They feel smart that they got the reference. So that's my answer. I don't know if that's a good answer. I'm doing my best over here. Obed Carden, thank you for the $10. That sounds pretty cool. Making a Battleship Fog of War type encounter. We label the columns and you label the rows. So yeah, like Battleship. Yeah, what you're doing is you're trying to kind of synthesize a ship-to-ship combat system, right? Because you're playing an RPG that doesn't have one, right? That's the problem. I'm sure there must be some good third-party stuff out there for that kind of thing. Grazitz plot to drag in a part of the Prime Material world. You have a Dark Sandman. You have a lot of really cool ideas. I hope your players appreciate your authorship. Unfortunately, the thing is, you're asking me to audit your campaign. I can't do that. I don't know you. I don't know your players. I don't know what you like. I don't know what they would like. And the thing is, it would take too long to find out. And I got my own shit I want to be doing, right? So my answer to questions like this, here's what I'm trying to do in my campaign. Matt, do you have any advice? My answer is always the same. Whatever answer you came up with would be better than my answer, because your answer is yours. It belongs to you, and it is authentically from you. You know, one of the problems with the running the game channel is that, you know, about 30% of the time I'll give people advice and they hear the advice and they don't really, I didn't give any context for it, or they didn't understand why I was giving this advice. And so they try to implement it kind of in a cargo cult way, and it doesn't work. It never works in that situation. Then they get burned out and they're like, why? I did this thing Matt said and it didn't work. And it's like, well, but why? Why did you do that? Did you understand why I did it? So that's the problem with trying to audit people's campaigns, is it never works. But whatever you come up with, your players are going to like. I appreciate the $10. Thank you. We watched Darkstar last night from Mimnos. People have been asking about the chain of Acheron. So the chain of Acheron, we'll probably do a whole video on this. Actually, we need to do a couple of like, what is MCDM about? We need to do a what is MCDM about video, because we still get people, you know, the videos are evergreen. That's the brilliant part of running the game, is people are still discovering the original videos and they think I work at Turtle Rock Studios, right? So why wouldn't you? Because I did back then. So we need to do a video about just what is MCDM. And then we need to do another video later on about what are we up to and what are we doing? And that needs to be a little bit more regular. So the chain of Acheron, I believe, is going to continue, but you folks aren't going to get to see it. You might hear about it, because if something cool happens, then I'll talk about it. But we're basically just going to go back to the way it used to be when we were happy and it was fun. Because I really love running D&D. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. I love, you know, there's nothing special about D&D in that regard. I love being a dungeon master. It doesn't really matter the system. I love running D&D, and I love making products. I love making products and making good products. You know, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I was inspired by various famous entrepreneurs, and I sort of always felt like I had it in me to start a company. And several of my mentors in my life would say things like, sooner or later, you're going to do this, Matt. So having a company and making dope products is really important to me, and I love doing it. I love running D&D. I love making dope ass products. The problem with the chain of Acheron was putting those two things together turned into a fucking nightmare, and I hated it. And everybody here at the company knew on Wednesdays, just don't try to talk to Matt. Just leave him alone. Let him go into his office. He'll shut the door. He doesn't want to talk to you either, and let him prep the game. It was so stressful. It was so incredibly fucking stressful. And the way the audience, there's no way to stop this, right? The main reason I was streaming it was because I wanted to give you folks an example of what I am like as a dungeon master, because I knew if I didn't, people would spin this fantasy of Matt Colville as some kind of like, you know, it's Plato's ideal dungeon master, of which all others are mere shadows. But that's easy to do when you have no actual example of what I'm like as a dungeon master. So I thought, no, I'm going to show everybody what I'm like as a DM, and they'll get it, and they'll be like, oh, well, shit, I can do that. Yes, that was the goal, right? But that's not the way. And that worked, by the way. That worked. And in that context, you don't need any more. You know, it's like when I used to post my notes on Patreon. I used to upload my notes to the Chain of Akron on Patreon, and they're probably still up there if you go dig around far enough. And people, once they had read my notes once or twice, they're like, oh, okay, cool, I get it. We got this all the time. People like, I thought I had to basically write an entire adventure. I don't know why I thought that, but now I've read your notes, and they're literally just like a bunch of bullet points and sentence fragments and quotes of the bad guys might read at certain points, and then lists of monsters for the encounters and that kind of stuff. And it's really pretty grabastic, frankly. But then they watch the stream and they're like, oh, Jesus, this is the notes for this stream. Awesome. It gives them permission. Once you've got a couple of my notes, you don't need any more. People want more because they mistake the lesson for entertainment, but that's not the goal. The goal was not to entertain. That I don't find the Chain of Akron is the only product MCDM has ever made that Matt Colville would never consume. I don't watch people streaming D&D. I don't really know anybody that does. Even my friends who are big D&D streamers don't do it as far as I know. And that was a problem, right? We couldn't make it. It was kind of masquerading as a product, but it was intended to be a lesson. And so obviously the majority of the audience are grading it based on how entertaining my friends and I are, but we're not entertainers. What are you talking about? Like, these people don't care about streaming. They all have careers. They are very successful in their lives and their jobs. And the only reason they're live on Twitch right now is because Matt wanted to do it. And they were like, well, I don't care. So that's fine. So it was a really unpleasant experience for me. I didn't enjoy it. I don't intend to go back and doing it anytime soon. But we're going to keep playing, right? We've got a whole new setup here that hopefully you guys will get to, I'll take some screenshots of. We intend on playing in purpose using Fantasy Grounds, because I don't ever want to go back to the which one's a D8. I don't ever want to go back to, okay, I got an 11. Well, you miss. Well, I hit last time. Wait, did you roll an 11 or is your total an 11? Oh, sorry. I rolled an 11. My total is a 15. And I'm like, okay, then you hit, right? And how much damage did you do? I did 12 damage. I go, okay, 12. Wait, he's not dead yet? I'm like, no, this goblin's fresh. But wait a minute. A minute ago, you said this goblin was almost dead. I'm like, that's this goblin over here. And like, oh, fuck, did the goblins move? I'm like, yeah, the goblins moved while you were in the shitter. Okay, well, then I'm attacking this goblin over here. I'm like, well, now I don't remember what armor class you hit, dude. I don't ever want to do that again. And Fantasy Grounds makes all that go away. Fantasy Grounds is so good. I can get up and go get a slice of pizza while you're taking your turn. I don't need to do anything. It's super, super nice. So we've got a cool setup here. We're going to continue playing. We're absolutely going to continue playing. We're just not going to record it. And if something fucking cool happens, and this actually fell out of a Twitch stream. I did a Twitch stream. It would probably now would be a good time to stop super chats, because it's very similar. It's very likely that I'm not going to get to all the super chats at this point, because we need to wrap the stream up. James is waiting for us to talk about monsters. We're going to do a little meeting. What the fuck was I just talking about, everybody? What was I just talking about? I just got distracted by somebody in chat. So what happened was, we uploaded a video. I think it was the "This One's For You, Eddie" video. And I was looking, YouTube, what YouTube does is it tells you, YouTube shows you your last 10 videos. And it says, hey, this new video you uploaded is number 4 if we ranked all of these based on how popular they were in the first 24 hours or whatever, right? It's a little bit complex. You just got to imagine, yeah. And so it was like, Eddie video is number 3. And I was like, oh, pretty good. And then it went, the Eddie video is number 2. And I'm like, oh, it's getting more popular. And this is compared to the other 9 most recent videos in this same span of time. The first 24 hours, the first 8 hours, the first 2 days, whatever, right? And I was like, what's number 1? And the number 1 most popular video we had uploaded at that point was we played D&D at level 20 for a couple of hours. Here's what happened. And it was a campaign diary, basically. It was a direct-to-camera live Twitch stream, and where I talked about playing D&D at level 20. We only played for a couple hours, but we had a lot of fun, and it certainly didn't seem intimidating. The game didn't fall apart or become tedious or weird. So I know there's there's a consensus online that the game falls apart at high levels, and maybe it does. We didn't play that long, but it didn't seem weird or any different than playing at normal levels. And that was, I wasn't on the hook to make that video. I just talked about it on a Twitch stream, and I watched it back, and I was like, this is actually, the people on YouTube should hear about this. So I uploaded it to YouTube. That was the most popular video we'd uploaded. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's what the chain should go back to being. It's not going to be campaign diaries. Every time I play, I owe you a story. Nope. That is bad. In fact, let me give you a real world example of this. A real world example of how I think. And some people aren't going to like this, but this is why I want to talk about it, so that you know, and you can make an evaluation. I rewrote, so we got work on a monster book, and one of the writers had delivered an entry, and the entry had the title of the monster, whatever it might be. I'm looking at a camera made by the Lumix camera. So let's imagine the Lumix is the monster, right? And there's a quote under that this author wrote, and I was like, I don't think this quote really serves I don't think this quote does the job that we need a quote to do here. So I rewrote it. I wrote my own version of it. And then our editor was like, who does not know who wrote what, by the way. Our editor who was working on it went to James and was like, this quote is junk. My quote. This quote is junk. And so James was like, oh, Matt wrote that. I don't know. And he goes, Matt, our editor thinks your quote is junk. And I went and I looked at it because it had been some weeks since I'd written. I'm like, yeah, it is junk. It is junk. This is my junk rewrite of a junk quote. The problem is this writer saw some other writer had a quote under the header and they felt like they had to do it. They weren't inspired. I wasn't inspired. They felt like they had to do it. And since they felt like they had to do it and they weren't inspired, what we got was something that wasn't very inspired and wasn't very good. And so I went to James and I was like, James, this is not how we should be doing things. We should only have a quote here if the author was inspired to write one and had a cool idea. It should not be a requirement. That's a very producery way of approaching development. Producers like lists and checkboxes and consistency. Consistency is the bugbear of tiny minds, right? They like, well, we've always done it this way, so we need to keep doing it this way. And they don't want to talk about why. Why was this a good idea? They don't like things being decided in the moment. They like predictability, right? And I hate that. I think that's death, right? I think that's it's the way you develop a product when you don't know how to develop a product, right? Let's just do it the way we've always done it. So I went to James and I said, we should only have quotes in here when it's a good idea. There should only be a campaign diary when I'm excited by something that happened in the game last night. I'm excited to tell you folks what happened. That's one of the reasons the campaign diaries were such a pain in the ass, was because I felt like I was on the hook to do them, even if I wasn't really excited about what happened and I didn't really have anything to say. It was a miserable, miserable experience. So we're gonna go back and we're gonna start playing, I think actually pretty soon, in the next couple of weeks. By the end of November, I think we'll be back and playing the Chain of Acheron. And if something fucking cool as shit happens, I'm gonna tell you folks about it. We'll make a video. Probably be a live stream, and I'll take that live stream and upload it. That's what the campaign diaries were. I've been playing D&D the entire time running the game was happening, and then there was this one session. It was the Black Pudding one. I'm sure you folks remember it. I saw that Warehouse Bar. Thank you. It was the Black Pudding session, and I was like, the people need to know about this, right? And people were like, that was fucking cool. And of course, they want to know what happens next. And I'm like, but what happens next didn't inspire me to make a video. So no, you don't get to know. You only are going to know what happens next if it's fucking cool as shit. Right? That's how it needs to work. There we go. Ta-da. So that's the answer. Anyway. So yeah, we're going to keep playing. Yeah. I mean, D&D is a big part of my life. I'm not going to just stop playing D&D. But turning it into a product and all that stuff, oh my God, no, that was a nightmare. But keep in mind, I enjoyed running the chain. When I was, I don't know if I made this point. Don't read too much into it was miserable and I hated it. When I sat down behind the screen and I was running the Chain of Acheron for my friends, I was in heaven. It was all of the Sturm and Drang surrounding it that made me unhappy. Not actually running the game. I love running the game. Rob Buck says, I've been following for a long time and your videos helped me DM my first ever campaign. That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm glad that our content made a difference. You would have got there on your own. I've said this a million times, but it's true. I hope your players know that it's going to be their turn to run for you soon. All right, folks, it is 12:10. We're going to wrap this up. Let me see if there's any super chats that I missed. I'm sure there are. I apologize. Love the work. I don't recall if you covered it in the past. What would I do with an initiative turn order to make it feel snappy? That's a good question. That's a good question. And the only answer I have is re-roll initiative every turn. That seems to work. People seem to like that. I don't know if that's a good idea or not here. What dark ritual keeps me active and proactive? Thank you for the $5. We talked about this earlier, but if I ever need to create and I'm not in the mood, I make sure that the thing I'm creating is something that excites me. Well, thank you, Paul Spurgeon. Well, we appreciate it. Vasily Shaparov. That's cool. 6 turns, decimate your torches. I love that. We got a new running the game video coming soon. We're going to record a new running the game video this next week, and it'll probably go up the week after that. You're going to get a chunk from a Twitch stream next week in which I tell what I think is a pretty fun story about the only time I played the Middle-earth role-playing game from the late 80s, early 90s. Do I read any lore books? Not really. So I think now we're caught up on Twitch chats. Thank you very much, folks. I thought this was a pretty good stream. I hope you folks got a kick out of it. And we'll do more streams on YouTube, but it's probably going to be one stream per running the game video. So you're going to get a new running the game video probably middle of November, about 2 weeks from now, I'm guessing. That is going to be about different styles of play and what dungeons are for. And also, those of you who are still here and are interested in some cool props for your game, I can very highly recommend, I just posted a link to a Kickstarter. I can very strongly recommend a company called Campaign Coins. This is not an ad. They're not paying us. They don't even know I'm saying this. We just really like their products, and we were using Campaign Coins way before I was streaming or any of that stuff, and their products are really high quality. So yes, I apologize if I missed any super chats, but I am only human. I'm only human. I think there's a song about that. All right, I'm going to try and stop streaming and see how long it takes. We stream on Twitch a couple times a week. There's not really any schedule. We might stream tonight. One never knows. Trying to think. Yeah, more running the game, more Flea Mortals, more Arcadia. We got a really cool Halloween episode issue of Arcadia. Yeah, I think that's it. I thought this chat went really, really well. So I hope you folks had a good time. I hope you folks enjoy your weekend. And remember the 3 rules, everybody. This is important. Write this down if you have to. Remember the 3 rules. First, imagine other people complexly. Everybody out there, everybody you meet on the street, everybody driving past in a car right now is going through something that you don't know anything about. So, try to imagine people complexly. Number 2 is be good to yourself, because no one else is on the hook to do it. And if you're not doing it, who is? And the third and the most important rule that we must not forget: life is uncertain. Eat your dessert first. Until next time, be seeing you.